I want to thank all of you for being on today. We're starting off the focus today talking about the summer school program, but as always with the Member Matters webinars, this is going to be an open forum for people to chat with each other and share, talk about issues that are kind of important to you, not just things that we put up there. This was an issue that came up at the last one as something to talk about. I understand that the application was last week for your schools, but that doesn't mean that it's still not a number of things to talk about. I will say we do have both Jen Smith and Brad Banasic on today. So when you have questions that require smart people to answer them, I have them online with us today, so they can do that. And I'm going to start with, I have a number of times just, thanked all of you for the work that you're doing on behalf of your districts. And in particularly in light of the kind of activities of the last week or so, or 2 weeks, we have seen a handful of districts in the state that have had, now that we're in live meetings required under law, we've seen some groups protest in person, the idea of wearing masks or requiring your students to. It's caused board meetings to be shut down. It's caused board meetings to be at capacity and have to lock the doors so that they aren't breaking the orders that are in place. And very clearly, I don't think that any of you signed up to be in the spot of protests on COVID or anything for that matter. And again, I just hats off to you in dealing with the the community angst that's up there on both sides of this issue. This is not easy for families. It's not easy for school boards and administrators. But I will say, I think school boards have handled this as well as possible. And I don't think there is anybody that should be able to fault you for the way in which you've worked with your communities. I think it's been admirable. And from MASB's perspective, just really just appreciate how you've dealt with your public. I will tell you that Jen is regularly in conversation both with the legislature and the governor's office about the statute that now requires everybody to be in person, with really very little exemption space in that. But as you are all aware, dealing with the legislature right now is not always the most productive, whether that be in funding areas or in trying to get them to understand some things. And so, just be aware, we still know that there are issues out there for each of you as local board members or ISD boards. We're diligently trying to work at the legislature. It seems at times to diligently be trying not to listen to our thoughts and comments as bills move or things are moving through. Now, well, see, Susan, I just insulted legislators, so I wasn't trying to be overly kind. They are frustrating. I at times miss the Capitol and the work that I used to do downtown in the lobbying space. I will say that hasn't been the case over the last year. I've been completely happy letting Jen and Jeff have that space and not having me down there. This is, I've been around almost 25 years in this legislature, definitely, or over that. And the relationship between the legislature and the governor right now is really problematic. I was around when it was Engler with Democratic legislators, and it was not where we're at today. And so, hopefully something changes. But right now, the early indications are, as we move into budget season, that's not really happening. So I want to just talk a little bit of background on summer school, and then have you share. I did get, Stacy had emailed to her a few questions on summer school. You all know that the applications for the program funded under House Bill 4048 from earlier this year were due last week. There are a number of requirements to meet the demands of that, to get that money. I will tell you, and it'll be interesting to hear from districts on this, some districts made conscious decisions not to apply for that money. The 90 million roughly that was put in place, I think their current number or what they showed is about $500 a kid, depending on if you were an innovative program or not. But some districts applied for it and they are moving forward. There are requirements within that, particularly, and Jen has mentioned this on other webinars, that you have to give them an estimate of the number of pupils you expect. And then you will be, by the middle of June, reporting that actual number of students and being paid based on that. And you have to return money if your numbers aren't as high. And if you actually undershoot in your expectations, there isn't a space for you to go and get additional money. Some districts made a choice because some of the restrictions, either because they had funding locally already set aside in their fund balance, or because they're expecting, hey, I'll be able to use other federal funds now or in the future to pay for this. I don't want to be held to these requirements. And it really depended on the district in that situation. So we'll let some of you kind of touch base on how you might have applied. And one of the big caveats that we talked to a couple districts on, a couple of them. So it's a requirement that it's 8 weeks long in this $90 million appropriation. And for some schools, depending on when they were finishing the year and starting the year, they thought that that wasn't going to work for them. So that might have made them not apply, but still run a program. There was another requirement that the pupils had to be residences of your district and have attended school last year. So that meant all of your schools of choice students would not be eligible for funding under this. That was brought to the attention of the legislature as it was going through by Jen and other lobbyists representing ISDs and other statewide associations. The legislature did not fix it. They are now talking, at least some legislators, about, oh, we need to get a fix in the School Aid Act or in a supplemental, and that may or not be happening, but we didn't know by the application time, so districts had to make decisions. So that's another piece that is hanging out there as it relates to summer school. And it created a lot of uncertainties for districts. I think there will be very few districts that are making a choice not to run any type of summer school, no matter if you're using the 90 million that's ESSER 2 money that the state appropriated, or if you're trying to do it on your own. I think the realization for everybody is that we do have kids that need additional assistance, and the summertime is a good time to try to get them caught up. So I guess before, I've got some questions that a few people raised, but I'd like to start with that first one and ask for people to chime in. I'll start with the opposite. I'm going to expect the majority of you likely applied for the $90 million to get the $500 a kid. I would be interested if you are a district that made a choice to not apply for the money, but are still planning on running a summer school program. Are you one of those districts? I'd be interested to hear if you are. And we've got a smaller group on today. So if you just want to unmute and be recognized, we can do that. Okay, seems like everybody that's on today either applied for access to the money that's in the school aid supplemental, House Bill 4048. Or are you a district that are not planning on running a summer school program? That would be also something I think would be interesting to hear from, that other people would be interested to hear from you if you were in that space. Anybody not running a summer school program? Okay. I am going to jump to some questions that were posed, and as you have questions, feel free to throw them into the chat section and we can take those one at a time also. So a couple of questions that came out of one specific district that I have here. School districts contemplating running a summer school program focused on musical instruction with a community orchestra that's a local nonprofit. Questions include, is this a program that the state would envision in offering this? So if you look at House Bill 4048, there's a couple of interesting things. So in the partnership space, the fact that you would be partnering with a local nonprofit or other entity I think absolutely based on the language of the statute that they in fact would say that is a good thing. In fact, when you look at their language of what defines what an innovative program is, it might very well qualify for the additional $100 because of that partnership in that space. On the flip side, one of the requirements, or at least it says, as you get to the end of the section, that includes programming in core subject areas, including but not limited to math, reading, and science. And so the question would have to be, if you were running a summer school program that was only music focused, it may not qualify, and the Department of Ed is still to issue final guidance. And Jen, are we expecting that this week possibly to come out of the Department of Ed?
The guidance they put out this week was for your application, which is always helpful when the guidance comes out after the application is due, but it didn't speak to anything else.
Okay. So, I mean, it is still a department application. And so if you were going to do music only, it might have some problems. However, if you were going to run a summer school program that included some of your teachers that would be in the math, English, and science space, and as part of that program, you were going to offer the music space in partnership with the community orchestra, it seems like very well that it could qualify based on what we are interpreting the act. The Department of Ed is, of course, going to be the final arbiter when you apply and say, this is what the program looks like. But it does look like it was envisioned to do something like this. And as long as you're also in the core subjects, it would seem like it would be funded. How would the program be funded? It's going to be funded in the totality of the number of kids that you have enrolled in your program on June 15th when you turn that number into the state of Michigan. If you applied last week and turned it in as an application, your district had to give an estimate of what they anticipated the number of students would be. You turn in your final count on, I said July, is it July or June 15th? June 5th.
June 15th.
June or July, Jen?
June.
Okay. The numbers that you have enrolled at that point, who would be the contact state agency, when and how would we need to be contacted? So this is the Department of Education running this program. It is not likely going to be them approving or disapproving ahead of time. Like you're going to put in the application in your description, I guess, if you lay everything out. And a good example would be like if it was music only and you didn't include the core subjects, they would likely deny that application. If you were getting funding through the $90 million that we're talking about. If you were choosing to run it on your own and fund it yourself, then none of the requirements that I've touched on would be a part of that. You would just make the decision on your own to run this program. Or another way to look at this, and I talked to a district last week. So if you have a group of students that are going to be enrolled in the program and they're going to be taking part in the math, science, and others, but you have other students that are not, and they only want to do the music piece, it might be a situation where the department in responding to the grant application would say, for those students that are music only, the district would be responsible for that cost. Those kids that are either enrolled in that and the core subjects or enrolled in the core subjects, they would be funded under the program. So again, that's going to be the Department of Ed making that decision. And as Jen mentioned, we expect guidance. It's after the fact, of course, about the application. The good thing about that is hopefully there will be contact information there so that your administrators would be able to reach out to the department and get maybe final questions answered in that space. The other question is, how long would the program need to be offered during the summer to be approved by the state? To access the $90 million in the appropriation, it is required that it's an 8-week program running Monday through Friday. So it is a full-length program. I don't believe, Jen, you can correct me, I don't believe it stipulates the number of hours in the Monday through Friday space.
It doesn't stipulate days or hours. It just has to be 8 weeks. That is the only thing that it stipulates. So if you do 8 weeks of 1 day a week, you should be approved by the department. That's where the department's guidance would have been helpful ahead of time. But the legislation is silent as to days and hours.
I'm just looking at the statute. Okay, I'm looking at the definition. 8-week program, week means a period beginning on Monday, ending on the following Friday. So as Jen said, it's not stipulating what that looks like. It doesn't stipulate length of time within that day, just that it's an 8-week long program. And that is one of the reasons, depending on, when if you were gonna, finish school, say around the 23rd of June or something like that, and you're gonna be back in the middle of August, you wouldn't be able to get an 8-week program in. And so you may in fact have decided not to apply through this, or in fact applied a different way, just because of the length of time that you have between summer. This was another issue that was brought up by Jen and her counterparts during this process, which is they made this restrictive. We can understand why they want to make these full, robust programs. But if the goal is to make sure that kids are getting educated and that they are having any learning loss compensated for by extra time, whether it's in a summer school program or whether maybe you're starting school in the second week of August, like in either of those situations, the kids are back in school. And so why does the legislature end up not, wanting to fund a program that's 6 weeks long and then, immediately followed by the beginning of school again? So, I would encourage any district that seems to be caught in the schools of choice piece, where kids that are your schools of choice kids can't access, or if you're caught based on number of weeks. This is written in the School Aid Act itself. I would encourage you to contact your local House and Senate members and let them know that maybe you've made application or maybe you didn't based on this. But part of this would be if they would change the language or reopen a new period to apply by changing the law, that would be something that you might pursue. So it's worth, I think, continued conversation. I see some other questions popping up. Susan, can districts charge parents of schools of choice students who want to participate in summer programs? I do know that districts can pay on their own for those students, because as a district, you would seem to be hard pressed to run a summer school program and tell some group of your students that they're just not eligible to participate, even if they want to and need to. As far as charging parents, Brad, I guess that would be a question to you. I know what the law says related to normal education and charging students. What do you think the situation would be for summer school programs of schools of choice students?
I think just based upon the schools of choice law, I would say no, you wouldn't be able to charge parents. You analyze that law with our Constitution on receiving a free public education. I would say no. I mean, there isn't really any precedent, I believe, on the issue. I think there's some older AG opinions that go back to charging for summer school, or charging for driver's ed, or charging for credit makeup courses. Just not sure if those AG opinions would apply. It's a tough call.
Yeah. So Susan, in the case that, the way the law is currently written, they will not be reimbursed. The school district will not be reimbursed. So you would have the option to say that they are not eligible to participate, and you would move from there forward, and they just wouldn't be able to. If you are then worried that you might lose some schools of choice kids because you're denying them access, then that would be a district decision that they would have to decide to either pay for those schools of choice students or make the decision to deny them access to the program. It's not a good place to be in. As I said, this was brought up to the legislature, and yet they still made this decision. And for some districts, they have large percentages of their kids that are schools of choice, and it denies these kids summer recovery, which many of them still may very well need. I see one that was a direct message to me, but I'll still mention it. So it says Monday through Friday, but it says so once a week on any day during the week meets the requirement. Jen, you're saying yes in that space?
I'm saying yes, but I don't work for MDE. But in our conversations with them, they have not clarified beyond I put the memo in the chat, but they haven't clarified beyond the words on the page, which is 8 weeks.
All right. Follow up in the public space. We were led to believe that Monday through Friday was required, but some hours of programming within those variances. Again, this is the downfall both of the legislature and how they are passing bills right now. And they're really not asking, as the Department of Ed, in fact, makes requests for guidance on some things that are unclear. The legislature has often been unresponsive in that space, not only in this space as it relates to summer school, but in a number of other areas where the department has asked for guidance or clarification. That hasn't been forthcoming. So it does put the department in a place to try to interpret what the legislature was expecting. We are encouraging them to interpret it broadly, to be able to fund districts and approve students as much as possible. But of course, you can understand the kind of risk that the department feels that they're in that space if they do it. And we are hoping to see more guidance come out from the Department of Ed on this. And they may address it as they respond to your applications also. So if you were a district that put down an application and you were going to run the program only Wednesday mornings, they might respond and say, we don't believe under the legislative language that that is appropriate, and therefore you would be denied, or ask you to make a change in that. That would end up giving the guidance. We, as Jen said, we just haven't had clarification ourselves from the department on that. Jen posted, if you did not read it, there are some legislators already saying that they want to change the schools of choice language so that all of your students would be funded regardless of their schools of choice students or not. But that in fact would need a school aid bill. It doesn't have to be the school aid like the school aid budget bill for next year, but it would have to be a school aid bill. Could be a supplemental, could be a single standalone bill, but that takes time to move through. That's why I mentioned, if you feel like you're caught in one of these spaces, then I would encourage you to talk to your legislators about it. The more that this becomes an issue, the more voices that they hear, the more likely they're going to take it up as a standalone issue. The idea that we'll have by June 15th, the school aid budget that both the legislature passes and the governor signs is likely not super high. I think the statute does say that they need to have one by, is it June 1st or June 30th, Jen?
By July 1.
By July 1. So they, their impetus to get it done by June 15th is not in statute. It would, seem to go longer. And right now, getting the legislature and the governor to agree on budgets, in light of even today, as the House started passing some budgets, they're only funding some state departments at 25% of their yearly allocation. And that would, lead me to believe that the governor will not be particularly pleased with that model. It would probably be hard to, we have not heard that they're doing that in the school aid space, but if you found out that you're only getting 25% of your money, it would probably make it difficult for you as a board and for your staff to figure out how do you budget for the course of the year ongoing programs when you are unsure from one quarter to the next whether you're going to have funding for it. The governor is going to be in a similar space in that. We'll see. I hope that it doesn't finish at that space, but that is what's happened in that. Other questions in the summer school program, or I would be interested, and I'm sure your peers would be interested in what type of programs you're thinking about running. Is it, are you only in the recovery space? Are you taking on some innovative ideas? Are you partnering with entities that you wouldn't normally partner with to offer your summer school programs? Even though the applications have been made, I'm sure districts are going to still be tweaking what their programs look like over the next month to month and a half. So I'd open it up to hear from people on what your summer school program is going to look like, and also maybe what you're doing we can't require kids to attend summer school, and so sometimes those kids that need it the most don't end up in summer school. What you might be doing in that space to try to get kids to participate. people that would like to speak? You can throw up your hand in the virtual space. Ken had a question. When selecting students, what criteria does grades matter? The summer school programs that we're talking about are K through 8. There are also appropriations for credit recovery, which would cover the high school age kids. So there's money for K through 12. The summer school programs are K through 8. And as far as selecting students, there is nothing in the statute other than being living in your district. They do ask you if you want to look at, if you're limiting access, looking at testing outcomes through the course of the year so that you're taking those kids that seem to have the largest struggles. But other than that, Ken, it would be up to the districts if you were going to create criteria for enrollment. Although I don't think that most districts in summer school programs typically do set that up in space. But if it is limited resources, that might be a legitimate concern. Another one would be if you're, I mean, with your summer school programs, what are you doing in the transportation space? Are you looking to pick kids up? I know some of you last summer ran the buses to bring food around, even though, you know, we were done with, we weren't in school. Might you do, you know, a dual purpose run where you are picking up and dropping off summer school kids while also maybe delivering lunches to other families? Any details out of your districts on that space? John, you always have a pretty good handle on what's going on in your district, and you're silent this afternoon.
Wanted to give others a chance to speak, but so far we've got close to 500 people signed up for our summer school program, and it's across all grade levels in here. So that's a good thing. And unfortunately, our COVID numbers are increasing again. And we've been out last week and this week at both of our high schools in there, and we kind of had a contentious board meeting last Thursday night to reconfirm our principal, or I mean our superintendent's decision to go remote for the two high schools in there. And the numbers that I have as of 8:30 this morning show we have 55 people in isolation, 244 in quarantine. And at our high school alone, we have 25 that are in current isolation in here. So these numbers are just reinforcing my thinking that we did the right thing in going remote for our high schools.
I see people are throwing up in the chat a couple of districts that are providing busing for their summer school programs. I do like what Beth, I mean, I don't like what Beth said, but I agree with it. And I like the question. You know, summer school often gets a bad rap from both parents and kids as it relates to quality, and wondering what districts are doing to try to make it more appealing. And I see Susan answered, you know, summer learning options, make it more of a camp feel versus remedial programs. Other districts and what you might be doing to make the idea of summer school more attractive. I know that there are a lot of, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, this is Jeff Tanis. I'm the superintendent with Comstock. I'm not a board member, so.
Oh, that's quite all right.
Coming at it from a perspective, we decided to have themes per week in our K through 8 program. Our high school will be more of a credit recovery, but we created themes such as sports Olympics with hopefully the Summer Olympics occurring. We also had a summer safari outdoor adventure theme, a mad scientist theme, and then a STEM theme. We're hoping, given the typical tradition we had was a 4-week summer program. 8 weeks was a big stretch for us, and we had been doing 4 days a week. We interpreted, or we heard initially, it was 5 days a week. So Jennifer's information, I'll take back to my team about how it's not necessarily 5 days a week, but that was a big mental shift, and we were concerned about getting staffing for our summer program when it's been a very stressful year as it is. And then all of a sudden to say it has to be 8 weeks and it has to be 5 days a week. So what the only silver lining in all this for us was that the stipend that was offered, which I don't think I've heard anything about the stipend so far in our discussion, but there was $1,000 stipend, if I recall, that garnered a lot of attention from our staff. And we also tried to look around and created a much higher pay rate than in previous years with some of this money. So we also, one thing we had to do was we broke it into 2 sessions. It didn't say anything, we don't think about having a session 1 or a session 2, but we broke it up so that there were 3 weeks. Then everyone has off for the week of July 4th. When we come back for the 4th week after July, and then there's 4 weeks after that would be our second session, totaling 8 weeks. So it'll be over 9 weeks, but it'll be 8 weeks of instruction. So we're going to have them outdoors a lot. Unfortunately, our district has antiquated, I should say tired facilities. So we don't have air conditioning. So we're planning on having a lot of our instruction outdoors. So we have a lot of outdoor themes. We're looking at using, possibly renting large tents and bringing tents in for instruction. So those are some of the highlights that we've come up with in Comstock. I'm in Kalamazoo.
Yep.
Comstock and Kalamazoo.
Thank you for that, Jeff. Like that's exactly the type of things that we want to hear about. It is a, I think, COVID in general, but now as we even talk about summer school program, I think it's created the necessity for innovation amongst districts that will benefit our communities and our students even after this is done. And I think that's, if there's a silver lining in this space, I think that is definitely it. And I would, again, Jen mentioned the Monday through Friday. We would just say, reach out, like to the Department of Ed and try to get an answer on that, because it's just, that's such a gray area, the way that things are without the legislature providing great clarification. And the Department of Ed is going to have to make that decision. I see, let's see, we have others looking at themes, doing the same thing. I see another, a comic camp for K2 students, which they're invited to specifically. Weekly modules that can be topic-based to choose to attend one or all. How is the stipend working? Jen, do you have information to share on that $1,000?
It's not supposed to flow until the grants are awarded, the summer school grant, but I don't know much more than that. It is $1,000 for teachers and $250 for support staff who work during the summer school programming.
And I'm looking just at the summary.
Jen, is that $250 total?
For support staff, yes.
That's not much of an incentive, but okay.
Well, for teachers, it's $1,000.
That we interpret that, or what we're doing is that's you get paid that, and then you get paid your rate for the summer school. And that's not the only payment, unless that's incorrectly interpreted either. So that was like a bonus, and whatever the normal salary or wage was on top of that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, that's not the only remuneration. So
no, it's just a incentive from the state for teachers to do it.
Right.
But yeah, you can't withhold, you can't use it to pay them instead. You still have to pay them the salary.
Right. Yep. And since I could say one more thing, since I consider all board members to be lobbyists for students and best practice, in the future, or maybe it's not too late, I would advocate that if the world according to Jeff could occur for the summer school program, it would have been that the legislature would have said, we support summer schools, go do innovative summer schools. We want to support you. We're going to pay you X amount, whatever it is, per child that you bring in. Here's $1,000 incentive, a $250 incentive stipend for your workers. Report back to us how many kids you educate, and we will you know, you could go ahead and do whatever your normal summer school would be. So we would have done like our typical 5-week summer school, 4 days a week. I mean, the flexibility just is not there. So in the future, if everyone could advocate for trust of the educators to come up with what fits their needs is the best. Not all districts are air conditioned, for example. Some are, many are, we are not. So the idea that we would have to have an 8-week session is just really daunting for us. So that kind of flexibility would be great to advocate for that. Thank you.
We certainly did. And we made the argument that we're talking about burnout. We're talking about teacher and student mental health. And now you're going to force them into a summer with no break. And that's not good for teachers or student mental health either. But
Right.
They were very stuck on learning loss and we have to do this. And if we don't tell the schools to do it, they're not going to do it. And trying to lobby on this bill was difficult. And we didn't even see the final version until it was brought up for a vote.
No, I totally understand and I'm aware of all the how MASA and MASB advocated. I'm just saying as board members, you know, legislators, they are in your neighborhoods, they are part of our communities. Having them to help understand and create mutual respect, the idea that they would trust the educators to come up with good programming. It would be diverse, sure, it would be varying throughout the state, but it would be tailored to meet the needs of local communities a lot better than this monolithic, all must do one thing. So hope that clarifies. Jennifer and Don, I know what a great job you guys do.
Thanks, Jeff. Carrie, you asked a question. Do they have to work the entire 8 weeks to receive that stipend? So House Bill 4048 is the bill that this is, and the subsection is 23C. And it doesn't go into that level of detail. It says that the district needs to have the program running and you're getting the grant for that program. And you need to be an individual support staff or teacher that is actually participating or teaching in that program. It doesn't delineate whether that person is there for the 8 weeks of the program or 4 weeks of the program. Now the department may issue different guidance on that, but the statute itself just says that the individual you need to be running the program and they need to be an assigned teacher. And if it's a teacher, that they're a certified teacher in Michigan. It doesn't start getting into the level of detail of they're teaching for 4 weeks or they're teaching for 8 weeks. The department may rule on that, but at least the statute right now doesn't have that.
I was just told that there's no requirement that they work the full program, but I don't have that in writing from MDE. But there's a lot of things we don't have in writing from MDE. Just that they are assigned to work, they have a valid teaching certificate, and that the district reports those teachers and passes along the money within 30 days. And as with everything, there's a chance that that $1,000 and $250 is prorated if the amount of money that was allocated doesn't cover all of the applications.
And that proration language also exists for the summer school money itself. If somehow the 90 million didn't go far enough, they could be a proration. I mean, it seems like at this point, the number of people that are choosing even not to apply for the money, and they're depending on the limitations on the number of kids eligible, it wouldn't seem like a proration would be necessary. And then you also have to deal with, the number of kids that you get to participate in the programs. But that understand that at least could be a possibility. As you're budgeting for 500, you could see something less than in that space. A few people in the chat have thrown up other options related to what they're doing related to air conditioning or tents or large tunnel greenhouses. These are the type of things that, as we have a group like this on here talking, learning what others are doing to try to address the needs of students during the summer or in any conversation that we're having, I think are the good takeaways for the members that are participating. So continue to share those thoughts. Other questions on summer school? We're about 1:45, or other topics that you're thinking about right now as it relates to school funding, something in your district, the federal funds, ESSER 2, and of course now it's they changed the name of it, so it's not ESSER 3, the second and the third wave, just to make it a little more confusing. But other questions that you might have regarding things that are happening, the open meetings. I know, as I said, Brad is on and he spoke earlier. If you have questions in that space, he may be able to answer them. Other legislative items that Jen could answer. Jen said they are still calling it ESSER 3. I have started seeing documents though referring to, is it ARP or American Recovery? Yeah, I think ARP or APR.
ARP is the full bill. That's the name of the entire bill. But then you have the ESSER money. And we were with the budget office. They're still referring to it as ESSER as well, just to specify the school amount. ARP is the entire huge amount of money.
I do have a question.
Yeah,
I have a
Jeff.
question about the read by grade 3. What part of that is still in force and what part is not? I'm hearing that there are still letters going out from MDE that families will receive, but there isn't retention this year, or there may be retention, or can you clarify? That's another area that has been muddled for me.
So the read by grade 3 law stands as written as of today. The letters are supposed to be sent by SEPI by May 1st. We have been told that if a student has not been assessed, then a letter cannot be issued, then the student wouldn't be retained, because the student cannot be retained unless the letter is issued. But the department also has concerns that there's going to be more students who get letters this year because of the testing. We have been talking about this for months with the legislature with no traction. The meetings that we've had with legislators, they have been very sympathetic to it, and the idea that we should not be retaining third graders this year after a year of learning that they've had no control over the supports they could get and things like that, that we should not be starting this bill or this year. All of that being said, we're not letting it go. We are still talking to them about getting the retention pushed back yet another year, because this would be the first year for retention. We are still having those conversations. I don't know where they will end up. But keep in mind that there is a list of good faith exemptions within the law that can be utilized to not have to retain a third grader. And I would recommend revisiting that list. If your district so chooses, we will be putting out more information with what exactly is on that list as far as good faith exemptions. And I believe at the end of the day, the superintendent has the final say on the retention.
Hallelujah. All right, thank you.
You know,
Brad, the question that I answered it in chat, but about the emergency declarations, what's the renewal process? I know that they have to, it's not they can't declare it once and let it stand all year long.
Yeah, so it's actually first the chief official of the municipality, you know, whether it's the chair of the county commission or mayor, city council. It's the first official that declares that, and that's only good for 7 days. And then, you know, before that 7 days expires, then the governing body of the municipality has to extend that. And when it's extended and renewed, it can be extended, you know, until the end of the year. And I saw one extension that indicated it's in effect until you know, the COVID cases go down. So it didn't even put a date. It used that as a standard. But one additional clarification, Don, that your meeting location has to be covered by the declaration of emergency. Just because there is a declaration of emergency, I mean, if your district is possibly in different counties or in different townships, and so you have 4 townships in your school district and only 2 townships have declared that state of emergency, if your meeting location isn't covered by that state of emergency, then you can't have a full virtual meeting. Only those individuals that reside in the area covered by the state of emergency could participate in the meeting on a virtual basis.
Thanks for that clarification, Brad. Jen, on the last question that was posted by Beth, I'm going to assume that needs greater clarification from the Department of Ed as far as, you know, if a kid comes in and takes, is there part of the time only maybe participates for 4 weeks, whether they would qualify for the full reimbursement at $500 and count as a full student, or is what you're hearing right now from the department is they will qualify for that as a student.
I am not sure, and I'm trying to find the specific language to see how it's written. Because there is a difference between offered and required. It says it has to be an 8-week program. So I'm not sure. It has to be offered and it has to be 8 weeks. So that would have to be an MDE question as far as whether the student had to attend 8 weeks. My guess is the intent was yes, but it depends on interpretation by MDE.
Yeah, the language doesn't specify, it's fairly broad, so it may be more about the district offering it. And I would even expect the legislature would get, you know, a bit of parental pushback. Like the idea is, yes, you want the program to run for 8 weeks, but they're going to get families that say, well, we only have 8 weeks during the whole summer and we want to go on vacation for 1 week. So therefore my kid that attends 7 weeks doesn't, you know, the funding won't come through for the district. You know, that maybe it was intentional, but and leaving it broad so that that could happen. But as Jen said, the Department of Ed really is who's going to need to decide that answer for school districts.
And this doesn't have the attendance taking requirements and things like that. So if it's offered for 8 weeks, it could be that the student that attends, however long they attend, will get covered. But the program, I don't think you could divide the program into 2 different 4-week ideas. That's where I think you might run into trouble. But again, that would be an MDE question, but I think it's going to depend on how you offer it versus how often the kid attends.
You need, in the application, it would just need to show that you're running an 8-week program. If the district, as Jeff laid out, runs it as 2 4-week programs, I think that would probably be the caveat, is what does the application look like? But as long as you cover 8 weeks, that's what the legislature is looking for somebody to do. And Beth, you're right. I mean, we're not here to talk about, I mean, we should be here to talk about best practices, and we want you to share best practices, but clearly the legislature and the governor's office and MDE at times don't always look at what, if modules can improve attendance and focus, that might be exactly right. It doesn't mean that the legislature, when they put pieces in place, take into account what is the right way to do something or the best practice and a way to do something. They often have other things on their minds as they are writing these bills, and they're often, in fact, run counter to what best practice would be. And I don't know that I would say that they intentionally run counter to best practice, but I do think that they ignore best practice information at times to suit their needs, depending on what they're trying to accomplish.
Don, I have a question,
Sure,
a couple
Susan.
questions to clarify. So if I hear you correctly, in order to be eligible, the students have to be residents of the district and having had attended school last year. Does that mean, and I'm trying to understand what to do or the impact of students who have left us to attend in other districts, but now are shopping for summer programs. They are our residents, but they've left us, but they were with us for part of the school year. Would they be eligible?
That gets pretty, like, that's a really fine line. I mean, if it
I
was,
agree.
if you had a student that was in Ann Arbor that was for the whole year in another district through schools of choice, they attended somewhere else, but were a resident, it would seem like they would not be eligible for funding. If you're now
So it's
saying,
attended, I'm sorry, it's
Well, you're
attended for
saying
the whole year?
if a student went to, I'm using Ann Arbor as an example. So
Sure.
they went to Ypsilanti for the full school year as a schools of choice student in Ypsilanti, but they were an Ann Arbor resident. They were not a student in Ann Arbor, and therefore even though they're now a summer resident or a year-round resident, but they're a resident during the summer, our understanding is they would not qualify. Jen, correct me if I'm wrong on that space, but I think both pieces have to happen. I think they have to be a resident of the district and have attended school in the previous school year.
For the whole year.
The way I read it says resident. Eligible pupil means, what is it? The child resides within the geographic boundaries of the district. If it's a public school academy, the geographic boundaries of the ISD. And if it's an ISD, within the boundaries of the ISD. It doesn't speak to having had attended for the summer program.
So maybe this is something we need to, again, seek clarification, because I thought I heard having attended school last year. And again, you know, we've got a group of protesters who have claimed at least to have left us and gone to other districts, but they're very, very, very interested in our summer programs all of a sudden. So I just wanted to to understand the impact of what we, what will be happening to our budgets as well as others.
I think part of it will depend on how you declare your normal summer programs eligibility. So it may not be a law question. It may be a, do you allow somebody that didn't attend your school this past year and they're a resident student to participate in your programs? And so if you have that clarification where you in fact allow that, it might put you in the right path to having them eligible to participate, because some of the language that I'm looking at talks about the eligible district, in this case being Ann Arbor. Well, it says in which the child was enrolled has determined that the child is eligible for enrollment in the summer program. So it's written rather confusing. I think it's going to be a Department of Ed. Jen shaking her head. There's multiple subsections, some on credit recovery, some on summer school, some apply to all of them, some don't.
Right, and it looks like the summer school ones are just, they must live in your district, because this was the argument they were making, that a choice student you can't claim in your district, but the other district wouldn't be expecting to claim a choice student because they don't go there. The being enrolled does not seem to show up, and I'm doing as fast of a search as I can, does not seem to show up in the summer school piece.
Yeah, I was looking at credit recovery, you may be right. I'm running back up to look at questions here. How is additional classes, summer programs affected if COVID-19 numbers go adverse and thus limited attendance availability? Or can they go virtual? I believe the requirement is it is in person. Am I correct, Jen?
For summer school?
Yes.
Summer school must be in person. Credit recovery can be virtual.
That's what I thought.
K-8 is in person. 9 through 12 can be a combination of in-person, virtual, or whatever you need it to be.
Jill, you asked, do we know why they're excluding schools of choice students? Jen worked on that. Jen, I know you got different answers, and some just seemed like they didn't have any, they weren't trying to, but it seems odd they would write it as specifically as they did without a specific intent behind it.
So what we were told at one point is that they wanted a definition, they put in a definition, and it was a drafting error, that they didn't mean to exclude choice students. So when they ran the second bill shortly after the first one, we brought that to their attention again. Like, there are issues with what came in 4048 that we need to fix when 29 went through. And staff agreed. And then when 29 ran, they weren't going to make any changes to it. They were just making a statement. They put the things that she vetoed, and that was it. And then she vetoed the whole bill again. So there was an acknowledgement that there was a mistake, but absolutely no attempt to fix it. So we never got that there was a reason, and I believe it probably was a mistake because I can't imagine the Republican majority accidentally excluding choice students when choice is such a big part of their platform.
Thanks for that, Jen. Claudia mentioned in their district, they're going with the school district boundaries, nothing about current enrollment. I had a superintendent mention it last week, so they may have been reading it wrong in their own estimation. And that might be where I was pulling it from in my own head. Well, we are at 1 o'clock. As always, we're trying to respect your time, and these are set for an hour. If anybody has a final question or wants some clarification, we can be on here for a couple of minutes to try to get anything specific answered for somebody. But I don't want to take everybody's time for specific information from one district. So thank you all for participating. Jeff, thanks a lot for sharing what you were doing in your district. I think that was really helpful in getting the ball rolling in this conversation. And Stacy just posted in here, we right now are running these on a monthly basis, regardless of the conversation related to where COVID goes. We are thinking we will continue them into the next school year, hopefully when COVID has minimized itself. But we need topics that are of interest, and we would encourage that you share that information with the email address at comms@masb.org, and we'll try to get topics that are important to you as topics on this webinar. So thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your week.